Hello, friends. I want to talk about the spiritual practice of writing this week, which, as some of you know, I have spent a little bit of time working with in my literary ministry and also writing this book, Writing to Wake the Soul, which is all about a particular kind of writing as a spiritual practice that I have named Contemplative Correspondence. It's contemplative because it's about stepping back from the activity of our daily lives long enough to listen, to receive, to pause from doing in order to pay attention. And it is a correspondence because it is like a letter we write to and from ourselves, but also it is a letter written to the holy, to our heart, to the world. And it is about the correspondence, the relationship between myself and my sacred source, between myself and others, between this and that and you and me, and what is here and now and yet to come and once was in the past. It is about correspondence, naming the connections between things. That is a spiritual practice of writing. You might ask what kinds of writing can be a spiritual practice, and it's really less about the form than it is about how we undertake it, approach it, and make ourselves available to it. My grocery list is often not a spiritual practice, but listing itself can be a beautiful entry into a spiritual practice of writing. In fact, it's one of the oldest forms of writing that reflect on the meaning of things. So it's less about the form than it is about how we make ourselves available to it, how we open our hearts and minds as we turn to words in a way that acknowledges we don't already know what we want to say when we begin our writing. We are turning our attention to heart, mind, world, self, others, God, the holy, in a way that leads to discovery of something we hadn't known before we set pen to page or fingers to keyboard, however you are doing your writing. This is about deep listening, turning our attention to the unheard, unseen, unknown aspects of our own lives and of the world around us. As we do this, what we often use is a writing prompt, at least in the form of writing as a spiritual practice that I have been leading for many years. And a writing prompt is really just the beginning of a sentence that trails off in ellipses, those dots that continue after a set of words as a trailhead, as a path, as an invitation to someone else to complete the sentence and write another and another and another. Consider it as an open door for you to bring your story forward. The poet Louise Gluck has this beautiful quote about ellipses in which she says, "I am attracted to ellipses, to the unsaid, to suggestion, the eloquent, deliberate silence." The unsaid for me, she says, exerts great power. It is analogous to the unseen. She goes on to explain how the unseen, the unsaid, the unknown invites our participation in revealing whatever follows. This is what the spiritual practice of writing does. It asks for you to participate in revealing something as yet unspoken and unknown. your words on the page begin to tell a more complete story. We have to acknowledge, though, that what is unseen, unheard, is not always innocent. We know that systemic oppression in all of its forms often depends on what is unsaid in order to continue its oppressive forces. And so we are asked to pay attention to the unspoken depth of systemic oppression as we do our writing. When I come to a writing prompt, I write about my story, but I know that often tucked into my own story are the oppressive forces that shaped me. As a white person, as a woman of privilege in a country of great privilege and power. And so I often want my writing as a spiritual practice to participate in and open myself to the writings of those in different social locations, so that my own story doesn't stand alone when I write it. And this is why often a writing session that engages people in writing as a spiritual practice might use writing prompt setups that include different people's stories, poetry, writing from other perspectives, to widen the scope of my story even before it comes down on the page. And also, when we engage writing as a spiritual practice in a group, we have the chance to share our writing, our questions, our discoveries with others after we have written. And that, too, honors the truth of our story while placing it in a wider story. You've probably heard that well-known quote from the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who says, "There is a danger in a single story." And she describes that danger in this way. She says, the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the whole story. Regardless of our own social location, when we write our story on the page, it is a beautiful gift to honor the truth of our story. And it is important to name that that is but one story in a beautiful collection of other stories that tells the wider truth. And so this is a part of writing as a spiritual practice, is honoring the wider story and learning to listen to that, to let the ellipses be a reminder that our story completes the sentence in one way, but there are many, many other ways to complete it. And that is a spiritual practice of listening to ourselves and to others that will widen our spiritual journey and our understanding. This week, we want to focus on justice as a theme for the spiritual practice of writing. And if you are in the Twin Cities and you are available to come to Unity Church for an in-person writing as a spiritual practice group, I hope you will visit our website and sign up and come and join our member Mary Barrymore, who will be leading that session on Wednesday night. But in the meantime, I offer you a short writing prompt so that you can do some writing on this on your own, and hopefully share it with somebody else so that you can share both the writing practice and your discoveries as you engage it, so that you can begin to share the wider story unveiled in your spiritual practice of writing. When I think of justice, I like to think of Paul Tillich's quote, where he says that in order to know what is just in a person-to-person encounter, love listens. He says, listening love is the first step to justice in person-to-person encounters. How many times have we been changed by deep listening of this kind? The kind of listening that happens when love opens our hearts to hear our own stories and the stories of others. This is the beginning of justice, Tillich reminds us. And it's the beginning of writing as a spiritual practice, to open our hearts, to pay attention to a deeper truth spoken by our own heart and by others. I invite you to think of a time when you received someone else's story with compassion and curiosity in a way that changed you, in a way that perhaps changed your understanding of what justice asked of you, of this other person, of all of us. Think of a time when you received someone else's story in a way that led to that kind of change. It might have been a small change or a large life-changing bit of transformation. It might have been someone you know well, or someone you just met who shared a story with you that changed your understanding of justice and what it asked of you. Or maybe it was someone you've never met, someone's story you heard in a podcast or on the radio or TV, someone's story that you read in a book or online, or someone's story that you heard in some other way, and it changed your understanding of justice and what justice asks of you, of that person, of us. As you think of this, I want to offer you a prompt to write either about that experience or where it led you. And the writing prompt is this: when I open my heart to listen, when I open my heart to listen, justice asks me, justice asks me, ... Follow that wherever it leads you. You can write in list form, in a poem, in a paragraph, in a story. Use whatever form you like. But begin with these words: when I open my heart to listen, justice asks me. And follow that wherever it leads. If you do this writing at home, I encourage you to ask someone else to do it too, and then to share what you've written with each other. Or come to the writing session at Unity Church this Wednesday evening to write about justice from some other prompts, and share with the group what you have discovered as you do that. However you engage your own spiritual practice of writing, friends, keep your heart open, your mind open. Let the words come so that you might discover with compassion and curiosity a new understanding that perhaps hadn't found its way to words before. Take good care. Be well. Keep your hearts open.